Welcome back on this Thursday as we continue looking at Isaiah. We are beginning chapter 2 of Isaiah. The first 3 days, we really focused on chapter 1, which in many ways was an introduction to the book of Isaiah, the initial prophecy that you could say that kind of sets up all the others. We're beginning now with Isaiah chapter 2, verses 1 through 5. The word that Isaiah, the son of Amoz, saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. It shall come to pass in the latter day that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established as the highest of the mountains, and shall be lifted up above the hills, and all nations shall flow to it. And many people shall come and say, Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways, and that we may walk in his path. For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He shall judge between the nations, and shall decide disputes for many peoples. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. O house of Jacob, come, let us walk in the light of the Lord. This is the word of the Lord. As we look at this passage, it begins in kind of an interesting way. It is the second and last introductory message of a prophecy. The word that Isaiah, the son of Amoz, saw concerning Jerusalem, Judah and Jerusalem, very similar to chapter 1. It doesn't give a time frame, so that's not certain. So it kind of stands apart, sets this passage apart from the one in chapter 1. And again, chapter 1 was full of words of judgment. This is words of hope and of the gospel. It shall come to pass in the latter days that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established as the highest of mountains. Interesting. The symbolism that the prophets often use is sometimes difficult to understand. The latter days that he talks about is the future, not the immediate future that would come to pass in their lifetime, but one that would be fulfilled in the future. He is pointing forward to Christ. The Christ is the fulfillment of the temple. The temple foreshadowed Christ, and now this is pointing out that he will be lifted up. He will be established as the highest of the mountains. I see this as being a prophecy of the church age, in part. So the church age being between when Christ came the first time and when he will come again the second time. And then the eternal age, where Christ will be exalted above all things for all time, the eternal age when Christ comes again. When it points out that established as the highest of mountains, the mountain of most importance, showing that Christ is exalted above all things. As we go down a little bit, in verse 3, it talks about the house of the God of Jacob. Why does it say the God of the house of Jacob, or the God of Jacob, not Abraham or Israel or Isaac? But Jacob, well, Jacob is the father. And the people of God were known as the Israelites, coming from the name that Jacob was given as Israel. It is from his sons that the 12 tribes of Israel originated. So it is just one of those poetic licenses that the prophet is making, pointing out Jacob. Other times we might hear him say Israel. We might hear him say Judah. We might even hear Ephraim. Those are all symbolizing and pointing forward God's chosen people. The next part that I noticed at the towards the end of verse 3, that he may teach us his ways and that we may walk in his paths. The teaching is the gaining of knowledge, but more than just the knowledge, it's a gaining of faith as well. The faith that God has given to us, that God gave to those Faith that comes through the word of God as God teaches us. So teaching is knowledge and faith. Walking in his paths is showing that action, that it's more than just knowledge. It's about action. It's more than just faith. It's obedience. Now, don't get me wrong. It is faith that saves us. And again, the obedience flows out of faith. Those who are faithful, those who have faith, the actions, the obedience flow freely from that. For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. Again, out of Zion, really showing where the word originates. Now, when we hear the word law, we think of like the Ten Commandments or laws that we need to obey. The law here was the Torah or the instructions of God, a parallel to the word of the Lord. You see those two lines are in parallel, pointing out that it comes out of Zion, the truth that we have. And then as it moves through verse 4, it shows that war, the move will be from war to peace. I love that phrase. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. A reminder of God at work, bringing peace upon the whole earth. Peace that came through Christ initially and the forgiveness that we have in him, but that full and free peace that we will have at the end. And finally, that last verse, O house of Jacob, come, let us walk in the light of the Lord. A call by the prophet to the people of God to respond to God in obedience, to walk in the light of the Lord, to follow his commands, to follow his ways. As we look at the next part, we see that sudden shift from the hope to the current situation. We'll talk more about that tomorrow. Go in peace, and we'll see you later.